3 days of deliberations concluded at the first G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting in Gurugram city of Haryana. We will tell you what transpired on the third day today. Also on the show, an analysis of the chair's summary and outcome document of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in New Delhi that was released on Thursday. I'm Munmu Bhattacharya. First up, the top stories. On the third and final day of deliberations of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting in Gurugram, discussions take place on enhancing the role of auditing in preventing and combating corruption and partnership with engagement groups of G20. US State Department spokesperson Ned Price lauds India for a promising start to G20 with its stewardship of the grouping. Says the US is deeply grateful to India for the way they have led the G20. Hyderabad is set to host a knowledge and experience exchange program for the emerging economies of the Global South from the 4th to the 6th of March as a side event, alongside the second Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion meeting of the G20. It was the third and final day of deliberations at the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting in Gurugram today. Discussions on the third day focused on two aspects. One is enhancing the role of auditing in preventing and combating corruption, and the other was partnership with engagement groups of G20. DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh reports from Gurugram.
Gurugram hosted the first Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting of the G20. Under India's chairmanship, G20 nations deliberated on areas of future action like bringing in processes where fugitive economic offenders can be traced and extradited faster and their properties situated abroad brought within the reach of the law. On the third and final day, deliberations focused on enhancing the role of auditing in preventing and combating corruption, partnership with different engagement groups of the G20.
We are very much satisfied with the way the Indian presidency is conducting this event. We support the priorities chosen by the Indian presidency, and certainly we appreciate highly the efforts that India put in organizing this event. It's very well organized and we are very thankful to it, and we hope that this meeting and next meeting, there will be 2 meetings more, will bring solid deliverables.
It has been a very useful presentations. We knew a lot about what G20 and what's going on, and a lot of interventions from the other countries were very useful, adding to a lot of our knowledge and the knowledge we have. And we are excited to be as a guest country there, and also participating by interventions in the deliberations made.
The Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting concluded with discussions on a draft of high-level principles on promoting integrity and effectiveness of public bodies responsible for preventing and combating corruption.
Over the last 3 days, we have had extensive discussions on several key focal areas, especially pertaining to fugitive economic offenders. The facets that we discussed include asset recovery, formal information sharing, informal cooperation. In addition to discussion on strengthening of institutional frameworks for countering corruption and how to strengthen and build in integrity principles in these bodies.
Corruption is changed. Corruption, we define it is liquid, is sometimes an instrument to infiltrate the economy. We have to consider corruption holistically, also including the relevant crimes related to corruption, economic crimes, organized crimes. The second message, key message, is we have to involve also civil society and business sector in our efforts in a new multi-shareholder approach.
Anti-Corruption Working Group will now gather again in Rishikesh in May and Kolkata in August. It will be followed by a ministerial level meeting of the grouping in Kolkata in August.
Under India's G20 presidency, the Anti-Corruption Working Group meeting has turned out to be an important milestone to strengthen international cooperation for action against corruption and economic crimes globally. With Team DD India, Shubhendu Ghosh in Gurugram.
Lead India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh gets us insights into the government e-marketplace stall in the next report.
In Gurugram, as international delegates are talking about ways to cooperate and fight against corruption and boost transparency, India here at the venue is also trying to showcase important success stories that it has achieved in the field to fight corruption and promote transparency. One such initiative is GEM. We know it is about a government e-marketplace, an online platform for public procurement. This was in fact a brainchild of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to make sure that the corruption could be curbed and transparency promoted. We have with us here Nandan Agarwal, who works with the GEM platform closely. Nandan, if you could help us understand in the context of anti-corruption deliberations, how important does GEM become?
GEM was established back in 2016 August, the brainchild of Honorable Prime Minister. Since then, we've taken a lot of strides as far as anti-corruption, promoting transparency, efficiency, inclusivity, one of the principles that GEM really operates on. So if I were to talk about anti-corruption and the crusade that GEM is promoting against anti-corruption, all our contracts are in full public view. You need not even log into the portal. Any user can just log into our, can visit our website, see all the bids, what are the prices, the historical returns and all of that. So I think that is a big initiative, that is a big step that we've taken to ensure that anti-corruption mechanisms are in place.
Right, Nandan, GEM is presented as one of the success stories of India's fight against corruption. With so many international delegates around, what has been their reaction and response?
No, the reaction has been fabulous. I think the scale at which GEM is operating, they are really appreciative of the scale. In this year itself, we've done about 170,000 crores, which by no stretch of imagination is a modest figure. And we are supported by a seller community of close to 6 million sellers, which is unimaginable. And 67,000 plus buyer organizations are procuring directly through the GEM portal. So I think the scale at which GEM is operating, they are very appreciative of the fact, and a lot of countries, a lot of invitee countries have expressed their interest to associate with us, to learn more about GEM, the technology that is being used, the processes and the team that GEM is. They are really keen on the good work that we are doing.
Right, so that was a conversation about government e-marketplace GEM, one of the many reforms by the Indian government that have been important in fighting the scourge of corruption and promote transparency. Also forms an important success story here at G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group meet. Shubhendu Ghosh with a camera person, Shailendra Chauhan in Gurugram for DD India.
Coinciding with the conclusion of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in New Delhi, US State Department spokesperson Ned Price said in a press briefing in Washington, D.C. on Thursday that India is off to a promising start with its stewardship of the G20. He said the United States is deeply grateful to India for the way they have led G20. He also said that G20 is an important instrument for the United States and India, and stressed that they have witnessed how the G20 can bring together countries for global action.
The G20 is an important instrument for us. It's an important instrument for India. We've seen how the G20 can bring together countries for collective action. We think what we've seen in India over the past couple days was no exception. And the United States, for our part, participated in this foreign ministers meeting with two imperatives in mind. First, to see to it that the G20, again with India at the helm, was a success, which clearly it was. And second, to demonstrate how the United States, together with our partners, is working collaboratively to build a world that is more prosperous, is more sustainable, it is more inclusive in terms of the global economy, and that delivers for the needs of people around the world, whether that's food, whether that's energy, whether that is health, whether that is helping people around the world confront the challenges and threats that they face, from fentanyl and narcotics to a changing climate to COVID and to everything in between.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar continued to meet foreign ministers on the sidelines of the Raisina Dialogue 2023. He met the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Faisal bin Farhan, and appreciated Saudi Arabia's support in the G20. The leaders also discussed global developments. Earlier, the External Affairs Minister met his Swedish counterpart Tobias Billström. The two leaders noted the steady progress in the bilateral sambandh or relationship and regular contact in the India, Nordic and EU formats. They also discussed technology, sustainability and economic collaboration. The two sides also exchanged perspectives on Europe, Indo-Pacific and other developments. Dr. Jaishankar met his Australian counterpart Penny Wong too. Both the leaders discussed issues of mutual interest among other things. Following the meeting, the External Affairs Minister said that the regularity of our contacts reflect the convergence in our views. Both the leaders took forward, in fact they are looking forward to an exciting 2023 in India-Australia relationship. Dr. Jaishankar met his Egyptian counterpart Sameh Shoukry and he welcomed his participation in the G20 meeting yesterday. Discussions between both the leaders focused on a follow-up to President al-Sisi's successful visit in January 2023. The External Affairs Minister held a meeting with the Foreign Minister of France and appreciated her support for India's G20 presidency. The two sides agreed to coordinate more closely on global and multilateral issues, and they also reviewed their bilateral relationship. An outcome document and chair's summary was adopted at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in New Delhi. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said at a press briefing at the conclusion of the meeting on Thursday that though there was agreement on the bulk of the issues that concern the Global South, a joint statement was not issued because of divergences on the Ukraine conflict. Let's revisit it.
On the bulk of the issues which concern especially the Global South, the developing countries, there was a considerable meeting of minds, and a considerable meeting of minds which has been captured by the outcome document. Now, the question, why was, did we fall short of expectations? Why is it called what it is? If we had had a perfect meeting of minds on all issues and captured it fully, then obviously it would have been a collective statement. But there were issues, and I think the issues, I would say very frankly, concerned the Ukraine conflict, on which there were divergences. So on the bulk of the issues, we were able to get an outcome document. There was a chair summary because there were differences on the Ukraine issue which we could not reconcile between various parties who held differing positions.
And joining us now for perspective is Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee. She is a former ambassador. Welcome, Ambassador Mukherjee, to India at G20. Let's get started with your views on why a joint statement was not issued, why an outcome document and chair's summary was issued. We know what the External Affairs Minister said, that there was consensus on a lot of issues that concern the Global South in the G20. However, there were divergences on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and the two paragraphs, paragraph 3 and 4, saw no unanimity. We saw the same thing happen in the G20 finance ministers meeting earlier in Bengaluru. But those two paragraphs were agreed upon in Bali. However, they have not been agreed upon in New Delhi. So why do you think that has happened?
Well, first of all, Moon, I would like to say that the outcome document is itself a significant positive development.
Right.
Because throughout the Indonesian presidency, there was no outcome document, only chair summary until the last day of the summit, Bali summit, when there was an agreed document, including those two paragraphs relating to the Ukraine conflict. In this particular case, as External Affairs Minister has just confirmed, there was understanding, particularly of the Global South, on all other issues. And why it is important is that facilitated an outcome document, because on all those issues which are of direct concern to the Global South, there was support from the G7 members of the G20, and then it could have been possible to bring out a consensus document had the two paragraphs which had been agreed upon in the Bali summit on the Ukraine conflict been acceptable, but two parties said that there had been developments post Bali and they were not in a position to therefore lend their support to these two paragraphs in Delhi. And I suppose due to paucity of time, it was not possible to have a perfect meeting of mind on all the paragraphs. There was a perfect meeting of mind on all paragraphs except the two on the Ukraine conflict, and that's why it was set aside and there was a chair's summary. But I would say that India was able to get
is part of that larger solution that we
Yes.
are deliberating.
Can we mute the extra audio, please? Right, Ambassador Mukherjee, on the question of strengthening of multilateralism, I understand that there was broad consensus that was reached, and there's a reference to that in outcome summary as well as in the outcome document and the chair summary, that is. But what is holding reformed multilateralism back?
Fertilizers, and they are
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
to the global economy.
Yes, I'm requesting the producer to please mute the extra audio that we are getting on the channel. Right.
Excellency,
Can we please mute the extra audio that we are getting on the channel? Yeah. Okay. But I can hear it, and perhaps, ma'am, you'll need to put your settings right. I'm given to understand that there's an issue at your end. Ambassador, yes. So, yes. Now, if things are okay, we'll take this forward. On the issue of strengthening multilateralism, there is a mention of that in the outcome document as well as chair's summary. But what is holding reformed multilateralism back?
Well, the reform of multilateralism is being held back because it would appear that the G7 countries, some of them members of G20, are not accepting a full reform of the Security Council or of the Bretton Woods institutions, and nor has the present multilateral system been able to find a solution to the Ukraine conflict, which is probably the reason why these kind of issues are holding up the summary document as far as the G20 is concerned. Our Prime Minister also, in his opening address, which was videoed, had also mentioned that it would appear that multilateralism, as we had hoped for, has really not succeeded. It has failed, and I think that was in the context of the fact that multilateralism was supposed to find responses to the challenges to international peace and security, and clearly that has not happened, and therefore it was unfortunately not possible to put forward good language on how the multilateral system, the present multilateral system, can be reformed. However, the answer to that is that new groups are coming up. We had the Quad Foreign Ministers meeting today. The Quad is an example of how new groupings of newly emerging powers or the new global powers are finding ways and means of operating outside the multilateral system, but for the good of international peace and security.
Fair enough. So that's the position on multilateralism, and like you said, the Prime Minister did say that multilateralism is in crisis, and the External Affairs Minister built on that in his address at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting too. Now, the other issue that is mentioned in the outcome document and chair's summary is of climate action. We are aware that the developing world has been urging the developed world to come good on its promise of climate finance of at least $100 billion a year from 2020 to 2025, and also on enhancing the commitment to $100 billion every year. What is the way forward that you see on this?
Well, India under Prime Minister Modi has been leading the way on climate change. Our International Solar Alliance, for example, is an excellent example of how India has shown leadership with regard to renewable energy. The developed countries have to also make good on the promises that unfortunately they have reneged on providing the necessary assistance to the global south so that they can make those expensive transformations, particularly at a time when the Ukraine conflict has caused huge pressures with regard to natural gas, energy, etc. In fact, there are countries in developed countries, for example, Germany and others, that are going back to fossil fuels, which are held to be responsible for pollution. But the reason for that is the shortage which has been caused due to the sanctions which have been imposed on the Russian Federation due to the Ukraine conflict. So again, these kind of developments link many issues with the Ukraine conflict and the need for its resolution, because the shortage of natural gas and energy is forcing many countries who had moved away from fossil fuels to look at ways and means of perhaps temporarily going back and restarting what is called polluting energy to meet the shortage until the situation can be resolved. So this again is a problem which needs to be addressed, Moon, in an urgent way if we are not to negate the progress and the advances that we've been able to make in the past 2 years.
Right. Ambassador, on the issue of global health, do you see more resources being mobilized going forward for prevention and preparation for future pandemics, with a pandemic fund having been created under the Indonesian presidency, but there's more in terms of mobilization of funds that can be done under it?
But absolutely, mobilization of funds and being prepared for the next pandemic and ensuring that those who are most vulnerable get the vaccine as quickly as possible, on the understanding that the world is interdependent, and if one part of the world is not vaccinated, the rest are not safe. And we saw that, that during the pandemic, even when India was short of its own vaccines, we still generously gave vaccines to our neighbors, to Africa, etc. That is indeed the way forward. And now that the world has come out of this pandemic, hopefully, it is very important to be prepared in case another such catastrophe should strike us, and to learn from the experiences of the past, to have more resources, to have research ready, and to ensure that in an interconnected world, those who are the most vulnerable are not left out. And that has happened time and again. It's not just the COVID. Even when HIV/AIDS struck, it was India's efforts at finding a cheap cocktail of drugs that was finally able to bring the HIV/AIDS epidemic under control. And we've seen what we've been able to do for the coronavirus. So I think we are again going to show the leadership on this issue too. It's a very important issue that was also discussed in the summit of the Global South, which we had prior to the G20 meeting.
Right, Ambassador, how strong are the references to counterterrorism and countering the misuse of new and emerging technologies in the chair's summary and outcome document, in view of what we see practically a country like China do at the UNSC when it stops or comes in the way of or prevents listing of terror entities?
Well, it was heartening that we were able to get a fairly positive language on counterterrorism. We had the strong support of countries like the United States, etc. And it's a very good development, because it shows that there is now global recognition that counterterrorism and the need to combat terrorism globally is an excellent way to ensure that peace and security remain. And this is particularly so in democracies, like whether it's India or it's the United States, because one of the greatest threats to democratic structures, which are open structures, are these kind of groupings which are operating across borders with impunity. And because of the existing structures, multilateral structures, it is sometimes difficult to sanction these groups in the UN, because they have powerful supporters who are members of the P5 sometimes, and who manage to use their veto powers to ensure that these such groups are not sanctioned. So when a grouping like G20 adopts strong language on counterterrorism, that is the most positive development.
Right. Towards the end, the importance of the reference on global skill mapping, considering that the workforce requires new skills, there needs to be reskilling, upskilling going forward in view of the jobs being created in the green economy and the digital economy.
Again, that is of great importance. as the global economy comes out of the pandemic and of course is trying to confront the new challenges caused by this intractable Ukraine conflict. New skilling, again, an issue which we discussed when we had the Global South Summit. This is of fundamental importance for developing countries and emerging countries to be able to embrace new technologies, to have a workforce that is as good or better than any in developed countries, and who has the necessary mobility to move from one sector to the other. So once again, this is an issue on which we had complete agreement. In fact, as I said in the beginning of your program, we had a very good document on which there was complete agreement on everything except 2 paragraphs. So as EM said, it was unfortunate that we couldn't find a perfect meeting of minds on all paragraphs, but there was a perfect meeting of minds on all the others, and that itself is a significant development, that but for the conflict, there was a perfect meeting of minds. So it shows that the preparation that India did before the G20 foreign ministers meeting, it paid off in a way because we were able to get agreement on all the other issues.
Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us with your views on the G20 outcome document and Chair's summary. Let's move on now. Hyderabad will be hosting the Knowledge and Experience Exchange Program for the emerging economies of the Global South from the 4th in fact to the 6th of March. And this knowledge sharing side event is set to take place alongside the second GPFI meeting, which is a Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion meeting on the 6th and 7th of March. The two-day G20 conference on the theme Materials for Sustainable Energy in Ranchi concluded on Friday. The delegates of G20 countries deliberated on materials for sustainable energy in various sessions and emphasized on mutual cooperation. During this, Dr. Srivari Chandrasekhar, Secretary, Union Ministry of Science and Technology, informed the delegates about the going innovation activities in the country and the ongoing work in the field of renewable energy. On the second day of the meeting today, the delegates visited Patratu near Ranchi and closely experienced the civilization and culture of Jharkhand in the Shilp village built in the lake resort. They also enjoyed boating and were overwhelmed by the hospitality of Jharkhand. Mizoram is celebrating Chapchut Kut, the largest and the most joyful festival celebrated by the Mizos. Apart from its cultural fervor, this year's celebration is unique as Business 20 delegates participated in a B20 conference under the G20 framework. This year's celebration is special as it is being held alongside G20 related events. And on that note, we come to the close of this edition of India at G20. Thanks for watching.
Come on boys, let's go practice.
अरे रुक यार, मेरे बैंक अकाउंट में गलत एंट्री का प्रॉब्लम हो गया है।
अरे तो बैंक को कंप्लेन करना।
बैंक को लिखे 1 महीना हो गया है, बट वो गूगली पे गूगली डाले जा रहे हैं।
तो आरबीआई के लोकपाल को इन्फॉर्म करो।
रुक, मैं समझाता हूँ। जैसे क्रिकेट में थर्ड अंपायर, वैसे ही आरबीआई का ओम्बुड्समैन। आरबीआई कहता है अगर बैंक आपकी कंप्लेंट को 1 महीने में नहीं सुलझाता तो आप आरबीआई के कंप्लेंट मैनेजमेंट सिस्टम पर ऑनलाइन कंप्लेंट कर सकते हैं। ये आरबीआई का आसान तरीका है आपकी कंप्लेंट सुलझाने का, और वो भी फ्री।
आरबीआई कहता है जानकार बनिए, सतर्क रहिए।
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Champion Speak. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. We have pistol shooter Anish Bhanwala with us, who recently won bronze in World Cup held in Cairo, Egypt in 25-meter rapid fire pistol event. It is an event where India has an Olympic medal, but they have hardly won anything on an international stage apart from the Olympic medal. We'll try to speak to Anish Bhanwala that what is the biggest reason and how big is this medal for him. Welcome Anish, welcome to DD India. Appreciate you giving us your precious time. First of all, tell us how big is this medal for you? Your first senior World Cup medal. Tell us how big is this for you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.